Hello everyone, this is Caleb Simpson, and you're watching my walkthrough for Chrono Trigger for Nintendo DS. Now that we're towards the end of the game, it's finally time to tackle the Black Omen, which is the final dungeon of the game. Now this dungeon is very long, so I'm actually going to break it up into two videos. So this video is going to cover the first half, the next video in the playlist will cover the second half of the Black Omen, so if you're looking for a later boss battle in this dungeon, then refer to the next video in this playlist. You can optionally come here in 2300 AD, and Queen Zeal will show up and taunt us, explaining that Lavos has already drained the planet of life force, and we've already lost, and it's too late for us. So if you show up in this time period, we can't enter because the door is locked. There's also some laser guards the first time you come to the Black Omen. They can be defeated really easily with any kind of full screen clear. The recommended element for that would be lightning because they are more vulnerable to that. So any character you have that has full screen attacks with lightning would be really good. But otherwise, just anything else, you can use fire too or whatever. They're actually not that strong. They have very little life. Alright, so we're going to enter the Black Omen, but we can't do it in 2300 AD. So we have three other time periods we can enter. There's 12,000 BC, 600 AD, and 1000 AD. And you can enter in any of those time periods, and the dungeon is actually the exact same. The only difference is just the fact that Queen Zeal will talk about how many more years it's going to take for Lavos to consume all the energy of the planet, is what happens when you enter. Now, as far as all the bosses and chests and stuff, all of them are the exact same. In fact, you can only fight all of the bosses and open all the chests once, regardless of which time period you enter from. So if you enter in the future and then you open a chest and then you go back to an earlier time period and then you find the same chest, it will already be opened. And same thing with the bosses, they'll already be defeated, even if you defeat them in the future and then you go back to the past. They can only be defeated once. So that being said, as far as the Black Omen goes, the only thing that's different is the fact that actually the last boss, Zeal, you can kill her in the future, in the later time periods, and then you can go back to the past and defeat her multiple times. But you have to go through the entire Black Omen just to get to her in the first place. So anyways, unless you specifically want to fight Zeal multiple times, there is no reason to do that. So that all being said, in order to get the good ending for the credits, you need to complete the Black Omen in the earliest time period possible so that it doesn't cause problems for the rest of the world or whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to destroy it in 12,000 BC, which is when it first appeared. So it just came out of the water, and now we're going to go blow it up, and it'll be great. So that's what we're doing right now, and that's how you get the good ending. So, when you enter the Black Omen, in the very first room, we'll immediately face off against a boss called Mega Mutant. Now, this is a pretty easy boss, however, it's just kind of a check to see whether or not you're strong enough to handle the Black Omen at all. So, if you enter the Black Omen and Mega Mutant just thrashes you, it's a good sign you need to leave and go do some leveling and get some better equipment before you try again. Now, if you can defeat Mega Mutant pretty easily and it's not too much of a problem, then that's a good sign that you're ready for the rest of the Black Omen and everything's going to be fine. So that's kind of how you know. So the biggest things that are going to matter in order to make sure that you're strong enough for Mega Mutant is your level needs to be high enough. So if you're in the lower 40s, it can be pretty rough. If you're 50 or higher, it's going to be pretty much a cakewalk because you have enough magic defense and enough stamina/vigor that it's not really that much of a problem. Now, otherwise, other equipment will help, better weapons, all that kind of stuff will help. It increases your physical defense and also just your physical damage with the guys in particular. But the main thing that makes a big difference is actually status immunity. Now, you can use status immunity for particular stuff, so you have like a memory cap or, a sight helm or whatever, all those things, they help, they're nice. But you want to get status immunity that blocks all status effects is really what you want. So that's going to be like Vigilant Hats or Angel's Tiara, etc. The Gloom Helm for Magus. Those would be the biggest things that are going to help. And also Nova Armor would be another thing you can do as well. But anyways, if you have all those things, or Shala's Amulet as well, if you have status immunity, those are going to be the biggest things that are going to help you. Now, in order to accomplish all these things, there are character-specific side quests that I covered in previous videos throughout this playlist, and those all give you the equipment that you need to tackle the Black Omen. So, I would highly recommend you just do that, both because it'll get you high enough level, you get all the good equipment for it, and everything, it's just great. It'll give you all the stuff you need, and then you just put on the appropriate items, tackle Mega Mutant, you're good to go. And I will say that those side quests are awesome. It's like one of the coolest parts of the entire game. Super, super fun. So I'd highly recommend you do those, because if you don't do them, you're really missing out, just saying. But if you don't want to do all those side quests, and you really just want to tackle the Black Omen right now, and go to the end of the game and do the tough thing, whatever, while it's still kind of rough and hard, and you like the challenge, and that's great. It might be smart, though, just to get status immunity at least. So the best one for that probably overall, if you want to do just one side quest, would be doing Fiona's side quest. Now that's not actually a character-specific side quest, it's completely separate than all that, and I have a video dedicated to that in my playlist as well. So you look back in my walkthrough playlist, you'll see the video that's titled Fiona's side quest, so go ahead and just check that one out. You can see how to get Vigilant Hats, which will really help for this upcoming boss battle we're about to do. So what you're seeing on screen right now is the fact that I was showing all of my equipment that I got here at the end of the game. I was kind of showing best in slot-ish, but there is a couple alternatives depending on what you want to try and do. Like, for example, putting the Rune Blade on Frog to increase his healing, or putting the Turbo Shot on Luca to increase her speed, because even though it's just a weapon slot, she's not really using her physical damage most of the time. so speed in that slot could be really, really good, so I was just kind of like showing all those things. I was planning on talking through it all, but it doesn't really matter too much, I guess. So there's just a lot of different options you could do for all those things, various accessories. Generally speaking, I think that gold studs are really, really good. And if you are worried about that, or like, you don't have enough gold studs, don't worry. We're going to be able to charm a whole bunch of those. Now, one of the biggest tips I can give you is I'd highly recommend you just max out speed on Ayla for the Black Omen. And the reason is because she's going to be doing a lot of charming here, especially if you don't have a lot of great equipment, because you can get some really good stuff here, in particular speed capsules / tabs. You can charm a bunch of those here, and that's super nice because you can max out the speed on all of your characters. It helps a lot. So that being said, if you're going to be maxing out everybody anyways, it makes sense to max out Ayla first, because that way she can charm faster, so you're not wasting as much time like waiting around to charm them, you know what I mean? So at this point in the recording process, I actually got kind of concerned because my team was too strong. And I knew that. I had read online and stuff that people said, oh, well, if you're like level 50 or more, then the Black Omen is just a piece of cake. And I knew that and stuff, but my character's like level 55 right now. And I thought, well, okay, I can still show the strategies and stuff, even if the boss is doing less damage. It's not going to matter that much. But this boss was doing like 10, 20 damage with all of its attacks. It just doesn't even scratch me, hardly. And then meanwhile, I two-shot him, which is like... anyway, I'm just face-rolling over this boss like crazy, and it was way easier than I expected it to be. So I got really concerned, because I was like, oh no, this is like terrible. I'm just going to mow over all these bosses, because I'm way too strong. I'm way too overpowered, which is the point. That's why you do all those side quests and get all that really awesome equipment, is to make this easier, but I just wasn't expecting it to be so extreme. So that being said, what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to show you this battle. Right now I have like really overpowered characters and everything like that, but I don't like one of the pet peeves I have as a walkthrough writer is like when people just say, oh, just level up a bunch. That's all you have to do. Just go grind somewhere for 3 hours and then come back and do this again. No, that's terrible advice. Like, if somebody's struggling with it, I don't want to just I feel like that's a cop-out answer, you know what I mean? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you a second game file, which is just after when I rescued Chrono. So I've done Chrono's side quest, but none of the other characters. So I have no status immunity, I don't have good equipment, and I'm low level. I'm in my early 40s. And I'm going to go ahead and do the entire Black Omen hard mode, and I'm going to show you strategies on how to defeat all these bosses with a not optimized team. Alright, so you just saw super overpowered, end game, team with perfect equipment or whatever. That's what you just saw. Super strong, super easy. So now I'm going to show more of a minimalist run where I don't have, well, not necessarily minimalist run per se, but low level, so all my characters are in the early 40s, as you can see. I'm wearing black plate on my characters because that will absorb some of the shadow damage that this boss does. It doesn't really have too much shadow though. Most of it's other things. I put the Guardian Helm on Marl because she has very low stamina. You can see her physical defense is very low. And then meanwhile, I have the Gold Stud on Magus because he's going to be doing a bunch of really expensive attacks, and so this way I can hit the whole screen, which is really good for this boss battle. And then otherwise, I do actually have some really good headpieces, but I won those in the Arena of Ages. It's unlikely you have those. The Angel's Tiara in particular is a really good headpiece you can get in the Arena of Ages, and that would be the best for this dungeon in general. I'm not going to wear them though because I'm trying to do everything super legit now, or without cheating. I'm trying to give you show you worst case scenario how you can do this, I guess. So next what I'm doing, once again, in this playthrough, I'm putting all of my speed on Ayla and stuff to make her faster for charming, because that's going to be one of the biggest things that's going to help us for this. And then I'm throwing all of my magic on her. There's two reasons for doing this. This will increase the damage of Inferno, which I will be showing later on in this video. And then also I'm going to be using a bunch of healing for her. She's going to be using Kiss for a lot of these boss battles because, especially this early one, and Kiss is determined by her magic stat. Now, one of the reasons that Kiss is really cool that I think a lot of people don't realize is that Kiss also removes status effects. So this boss is going to be applying Chaos, which is awful, and it's also going to hurt our characters quite a bit. Now, normally you can use a Panacea / heal, which will remove status effects, and that's fine. However, Ayla can also heal people at the same time. By using Kiss, it will heal people, and it will also remove the status effects. So what I did is I put Shala's Amulet on Ayla, which gives her status immunity. Then the other two characters are going to be having Chaos applied to them over and over again, but Ayla can remove that. So if I kiss one of them, and then that character can do something else, or they can use a Panacea / heal on somebody else, or Ayla can kiss again the next turn. So anyways, having high speed on her, having high magic, means that her kiss ability is really, really good, both because it's happening more often, and also the fact that it heals more. Also, just so you know, Ayla scales better with magic than just about any other character in the game, so as a result, the healing benefit she gets out of giving her just a little bit of magic is amazing. So again, just to reiterate, we're doing this worst case scenario. My character's a low level, I don't have status immunity on anybody except for Ayla, so what I'm doing is I'm starting off the battle by using Kiss on Marl. This will remove her status effect and also heal her. Look how much this heals for though, 500 because I gave Ayla a bunch of magic real quick. It's super, super good. So next I'm going to go ahead and kiss Magus as well. This will remove the Chaos debuff off of him, and then meanwhile I'm using Marl to haste everyone. I started off by hasting Ayla actually as my priority because I want to make sure that she can kiss as soon as possible. So just that by itself, Ayla with a bunch of speed and haste on her will allow her to be kissing like really frequently. She's probably able to heal everybody just in and of herself, even though all my other defenses are pretty low. That's like the biggest thing that's going to help. One of the things I think is kind of cool about this boss is the fact that the status immunity is like the most awful part of it, and it's like you're just entering the dungeon and we're going to need status immunity, so one of the first things that we have available to us is actually the fact that you can charm the lower half to get a Vigilant hat. And that's one of the items that will allow us to have status immunity. So that's super nice that, like, you know what I mean? Like, they introduced this mechanic of, like, oh no, like, this whole dungeon is all about status immunity, and that's what we really need to do it, and they already supply us with something we need for that. But it's kind of like this little hidden thing. It's almost like an Easter egg where you don't even really know it's there. Like, yeah, unless you knew it ahead of time, or, like, you get it, you see it in your, whatever it's called, the boss entry, whatever, the bestiary. You see it in the bestiary later that you can charm it off of it, but if you didn't know that, then you would have just gone through here without realizing. Anyway, I just think it's cool. It's kind of like, just gives it this level of depth the second time you play through or whatever. You're like, yeah, I can like charm this, and then I'm like good to go for the next section. It's great. So meanwhile, I'm just using Magus to use full screen attacks, and once I once I haste him in particular, he'll be able to do it faster, but this boss doesn't really have that much life anyways. Like, you know, look at the lower half only has like 4,000 life. Like, if I just use 3 Dark Matters with Magus, like, he's pretty much toast anyway. So like I was saying earlier, I feel like Chaos is definitely the biggest threat that this boss has, like, just because by the time you regain control of your characters, it's just too late. Like, you spend so much time just trying to get rid of the status effects so you can heal or whatever, and then by the time that you're finally ready to start doing something again, you're already almost dead, just because the boss has been attacking you in the meantime. So the Chaos is just awful, so that's the biggest thing that needs to be dealt with. So I charmed both of the sides of the boss, and now I'm finally ready to continue onwards, but that's how you can defeat that first boss pretty easily. So I did it with 2 healers, in particular using Ayla because she can remove status effects. It's just smart. You can use Panaceas and use other regular healing abilities too, but Ayla's just nice because she does both of those things at the same time. So once again, if you're coming here early, I highly recommend that you charm the lower half of that boss in order to get a Vigilant hat, which is going to be a very useful thing, and that will allow you to have 2 characters now that are status immune, like here right at the beginning of the Black Omen, which is a really big thing. So that boss can be really rough, but that's my recommendation on how to get through it. Up ahead we have some shieldsmen, otherwise called incognitos in older versions of the game, and they can be killed by attacking them when their shield is no longer in front of them, so just kind of hover over them with the attack command, and then as soon as they show their face, move over to them. One thing that's kind of weird is it does like deselect them. You have to wait for them to be completely exposed before you move your selection over to them, otherwise you'll accidentally select the wrong one. If you hit them while their shield is up, then they'll counterattack you, and you can charm them to get a muscle ring. This will increase your stamina/vigor stat, which will reduce incoming physical damage. That doesn't really matter if you're going to use that. It's like the most useful characters is going to be like on Marl or Luca, but I don't think it matters too much. Like, by the time you can even start charming that item, it's like you're already at the point where you're starting to get overpowered and it doesn't really matter anymore. So whatever you want to do there, like, I feel like I would much rather have other equipment, or like, you know, like for example, I would rather wear Shala's amulet for status immunity and then wear like the Guardian helm instead, because that'll reduce incoming physical damage by 1/3. That's just a way better combination of items. I just don't think the muscle ring is worth it in comparison. Now in the next room we do have our Martellos, which you can charm them for Turbo Ethers, which will give you 99 MP. That's actually a pretty sweet item, and it is fairly expensive. We actually can purchase those here up ahead, and that's not too bad. These enemies don't really do that much damage, and if you wear the black plate, then their lasers will heal you instead, which is kind of fun. Like I was saying earlier at the beginning of this dungeon, if plate is kind of like the highest level gear you have, I'd recommend wearing as much black plate as you have access to, because it's super useful, because there's a lot of enemies that do shadow damage here, and as a result they'll heal you instead, and that's kind of nice. If you have higher quality equipment than that, like prismatic dresses, for example, are just really good, and then otherwise, like, say, Moonbeam armor, for example, for the guys is really good, because that'll give you the magic defense you need to survive some of these boss attacks. So here we have, I believe, my most hated, like, most despised enemy in this entire dungeon, called Fang Beasts, otherwise known as Goons. Now these guys will absorb light and shadow, which is kind of rough, and then so that we don't have a lot of attacks that'll work on them. So you're pretty much using physical or otherwise fire is kind of pretty much the only thing you're using, other dual attacks if you can. But I recommend you take them out as soon as possible, because it's not uncommon for them to just like chain attack you with a combo and then just defeat one of your characters right away. So you're gonna have to be ready to res them, which is kind of awful. But yes, I highly recommend you charm them if you can. It's a little bit challenging, but if you can pull it off, I would highly recommend it because the Nova armor that these guys drop is super valuable if you're here early level. I think this is kind of fun because it's like within the first 2 rooms of this dungeon, we already have gathered enough status immunity that we can take any of the bosses for the rest of the entire game, and we have enough status immunity that we can at least survive. So that's actually pretty darn sweet, the fact that they even did that. So I just think that's really cool. It just makes me happy that we at least have the option. So what I'm doing is I'm just charming with Ayla, and then meanwhile I'm healing with Marl, so that's why I brought hers, because she can full heal everybody with 1 shot every time, so it's just super good. One of the things that makes these guys really annoying is the fact that they have Wind Blow, which will apply chaos, and it's just super annoying. Like, of all the things they just have to have this ability too. If you have status immunity like Ayla does, it doesn't matter, but then meanwhile if you don't have status immunity, it just makes this even worse, because these guys can just, I don't know, it ramps up and it gets super nasty really quick. Now remember that I can go ahead and just use Kiss on Luca as well. That would be another alternative for this as well. I'm going to go ahead and use a Panacea on her because I might as well to remove the status effect. But I'm ready, now that I have finally charmed both these guys, I'm ready to go ahead and defeat them as soon as possible. I want to get rid of them because they're just a pain. I don't want to deal with them. Now I actually have used Flare once already, so just a little bit more damage will be fine. Otherwise, I can also use any other attacks as well that do enough damage to them. I think they have like around 2,000 life. It's not very much. And again, just to reiterate too, like right now I'm showing a playthrough of like low-level characters. I've only done Chrono's side quest and haven't done all the other stuff. If you've done all the other character-specific side quests, you should have way better equipment than Nova armor, and it's not all that great. I'm just showing this is kind of the minimalist, like if you haven't done all those extra stuff, you don't have the best equipment in the game, then at this point Nova armor would actually be amazing, because if you can get 4 of them, if you can charm 4 of them, you can put them on all your guys, and then they have status immunity for the rest of the whole dungeon, which is great. One of the things I find sort of sad about Magus is I think he's a really cool character and he's useful and stuff, but like as soon as you acquire him, for all of the following side quests, he's actually great. He's an amazing character for all that stuff, and he's really flexible. He has a lot of access to different elements. There's certain battles where you obviously don't want to use him because you need single target instead of full screen attacks, but he's just really good. And then you have access to Shadow, which is an element you didn't really have so much before. We had like Anti-Code Bomb 3 and stuff. So there was a couple options we had. However, it's just really nice to have a single character you can use as a third who can do that. But here, once we get to the Black Omen, now all of a sudden, like 4 or 5 of the enemies here are immune or will absorb Shadow and it heals them instead. So it's just really awkward. You get into these combats where all of a sudden he can't really do anything, or he's even detrimental to having your team. And granted, you can use, Fire 2, Ice 2, Lightning 2. By the way, of those, you definitely want to use Fire 2 because that's typically, fire is the element that most enemies are susceptible to. There's fewer enemies that have resistance to fire than any other element in the entire game. So, that being said, if you can't use Shadow with Magus, you're better off using Fire 2. But yeah, I just find it sad, like, here we get Magus and he's like pretty good, and then we get him some TP and he starts getting really awesome, and then you get to Black Omen and he suddenly is just bad again, because most of these enemies are resistant to Shadow and it's just awful. Now here we have a new enemy called a Syncrite. Now these kind of enemies are kind of a pain. They actually have some pretty nasty abilities. Now when defeated, they will give you a Turbo Ether. However, you can only get up to 1 per combat. So because there's 2 of them here, I'll get a Turbo Ether from one of them for killing them. The other one will not give me the Turbo Ether. And if you charm them instead, you will actually get a gold earring, which will boost your HP by 50% when worn. And I feel like normally that's kind of a garbage item. However, for the Black Omen, if you are here early, it actually is pretty nice. And the reason is because it can boost your HP by quite a bit. This is particularly noticeable on characters that have less health, in particular Marl. And the reason I say that is because, Marl can full heal anybody, when they're almost dead, especially, so her physical defense is kind of low. So for some of the last boss battles, in particular Lavos, he has a bunch of really hard-hitting physical attacks. So if she has enough defenses, either, stamina/vigor and magic defense, if she has enough of that, or she has enough HP to just survive the attack from the boss, then she can full heal herself and she's fine. It doesn't matter. Or if you're using Mega Elixirs or whatever. So like the gold earring is actually pretty useful for some of the upcoming fights. So the fact that we can charm it here is kind of interesting. So there's a Sparkly here where you can save and use some shelters, which would be really nice. So restore your MP, in particular on Ayla, because we're going to be charming with her a lot in the next section. I also swapped out some of my equipment, so I put the Nova armors on some of my guys, because I just charmed 2 of them off those Fang Beasts, and then I moved the Vigilant hat over onto one of my other girls. So now I have 2 girls that have status protection because of Shal's Amulet and the Vigilant hat. And then now, in this next room, you definitely want to bring Ayla because we have a new enemy called a panel. Now these guys have 2 attacks. They have a laser attack, and they also have this dual tech when there's more than 1 panel, which is like this lightning attack. It's not actually lightning though, it's shadow, which is weird. So I have black plate on all my girls right now, so it's actually healing them instead, which is nice. But anyways, what you want to do is you definitely want to bring Ayla because you want to charm these panels because they each give you a speed capsule/tab. Super, super important. So if you charm all of the panels in the Black Omen, then you can get a total of 13 speed capsules / tabs, which should max out most of your characters, especially if you've been collecting some speed capsules along with me throughout the game. Now, all of these panels, just so you know, are a one-time fight. After you defeat them, they're gone forever, and they don't come back in all of the time periods. So this is one of those, like, one-time only Black Omen enemies. So that being said, if you enter a room like this, that looks sort of like this, really quickly you want to put Ayla in your party so that if you do walk forward and there is a panel battle, that you can charm it so that you're prepared to do it, so you can get some of those finite number of speed capsules. One sort of interesting nuance to know about the speed stat that I haven't really had too much of a chance to talk about. I've mentioned before how the haste buff you get either from Marl or from wearing like the haste helm or Angel's Tiara will then make it so your characters are, hasted as soon as you enter combat. But what that does is it boosts it up to 24 speed. So as long as you have at least 12 speed, you can get the full benefit of the haste buff. However, there's one extra little nuance about it that I think a lot of you probably don't know, and that is that the level of speed you have beyond 12 will determine how full your action gauge is when you start combat. So there is actually a benefit to having max speed and the haste buff as soon as you start combat. So if you have either the haste helm or the Angel's Tiara on Ayla, for example, then when you start combat, she'll already have a full action gauge as soon as you start, which is very useful for boss battles and stuff, but it's also useful for charming. That's actually one of the things that I would highly recommend you do. So we're going to get a whole bunch of speed capsules / tabs off of these panels, and I'm actually going to give them to both Ayla and Marl as soon as possible so that they can use Twin Charm as soon as battle starts. Part of the reason for that is because I really struggled with those Fang Beasts earlier, for example. So if I can charm enemies right away and then instantly follow up with my third character and start wiping them out, then that would be really handy. Now, in this next room, we have a new enemy called a Watcher / Boss Orb, and it will always cast Omnilock at the beginning of combat, regardless of how much speed you have or if you have the haste buff or both. Like, no matter how fast you make your characters, it will always cast Omnilock, even if your characters technically go first. Like, you have access to your... I don't know, it's kind of weird. It's almost like Omnilock is regardless of speed. Like, you have access to your tech button, but even though it doesn't matter how fast I tap it with the stylus, it still is locked for me even before Omnilock actually goes off, which is a really weird thing. I don't even know why it works that way. It feels like I should be able to do something with it, especially because the sidekicks / nomads that are with them, those enemies, according to the bestiary anyways, can be charmed to get speed capsules / tabs. But I'm unable to do so because I can't get past Omnilock. So I'm not really even sure why. Yeah, I don't know. If somebody knows a trick to it, I looked online and stuff, and people talk about it in forums and stuff like that, and they're like, the trick to not getting Omnilock is to not fight enemies that cast Omnilock, Everyone's really sarcastic about it. So anyways, I don't really think it's possible. Now, one way you can kind of make this a little bit easier is when you enter rooms where you see a bunch of these guys up ahead, you can put on some Berserker Rings, which is really nice because all you can do is use your regular attack, and Berserker Ring will make your guys attack as soon as possible. So it's kind of like a lazy way of getting through here, so you're not just button mashing the whole time. But yeah, unfortunately, we're not able to do anything cool with these enemies, so instead we're just, like, running through here. This is actually fairly easy. This particular room will always respawn really easily, so if you're wanting some pretty, like, high-end XP, it's a pretty good option because you can just put Berserker Rings on all your characters and then just run back and forth, because when you leave this room and come back, all these enemies will reappear. So it's a really easy way of, like, especially if you do have up to 3 Berserker Rings, because then you can just kind of, like, let your guys do their thing for a bit, and you just, like, look over somewhere else, watch TV or whatever, and so you can walk back and forth and level up your characters. Really great way to get some TP, by the way, if you are, like, still needing some abilities unlocked. Just put those characters in your party real quick, and then just let them run back and forth and punch these guys. In this next room, we have Metal Mutants. Try not to stay in combat with these guys too long because they tend to focus on one character at a time, and they do have a nasty light-based attack, so if you want, you can, like, remove that threat by simply wearing some light plate instead, so that way they will heal you instead. In general, though, they do tend to use a big variety of attacks, and they can steal a lot of MP and stuff, too. I feel like it's better overall to try and take care of them as soon as possible, so if I do charm them, I charm, like, one of them, and then go ahead and finish them off as soon as possible. Up ahead, we have another new enemy called a Flyclops. These little red guys will give you a gold stud when charmed, which is one of the best items in the game. It's super useful. For me, I actually have a couple gold studs because I won them in the Arena of Ages, other than the standard one you get in the game. But this is a great place to get them. Flyclops will always give them to you when charmed. A couple of combats have just like one other enemy or something, so this may not necessarily be the easiest one because these metal mutants can be kind of rough. But I would recommend that you try and charm some Flyclops as long as you're here in the Black Omen, because it is very useful for the final boss battle. There's a couple points where having a gold stud is going to be very, very handy, and also for the Dimensional Vortex boss as well. I don't know, all the bosses for all the endgame content, it's just really nice to have gold studs. Also, though, in addition to that, is if you're planning on going into New Game Plus, you take your accessories with you. So if you have a whole bunch of gold studs, then you have one for all of your characters in your party, which is just really nice. If you're going to be playing through the game again, having a gold stud for all of your characters is very handy. So, that all being said, it's something I would keep an eye out for, and I would recommend that you charm at least a couple of them. So once you reach the end, you'll come to your first portal. This will take us to another room, and just beyond there is our first elevator. Now these elevators have 3 potential combats, one of which is Fang Beast, which you want to charm to get Nova armors for your guys if you're playing here at low level, and then otherwise it can have Cybots. Now Cybots, if you're going to be fighting against them, you really want to have some status immunity because they can apply Chaos. I think that's the only one they do. It might just be a random status effect they give you, but I think it's only Chaos. Anyways, regardless, they do nasty things to you. So wear status immunity if you can, and how you do this at low level is put the Vigilant hat as well as the Shala's Amulet on the girls, and then use Nova armor for the guys. So one of my chicks currently does not have status immunity, but everybody else does. So anyways, the third combat it could potentially be is these Ruminators / Hydrocondas. Now these enemies have a very nasty attack that does 1,500 damage of lifesteal to their target, and they use it on a random target, so they can actually eat each other, or they can eat your characters and instant KO them, which is awful. So what you can do though is you can charm them to get Mega Elixirs, which is super useful. Now my experience has been that these guys always attack each other first. So if you have 4 snakes, they'll eat 2 of the snakes, and then they'll eat each other. Or yeah, they'll eat each other, and then they'll eat you. So the very first attack will always be them eating each other. It's been my experience, but I don't know that that's always true. So that all being said, if they scare you because they will instantly kill you, then you can go ahead and just kill them right away. Now, I also have haste helms on Marl and Ayla, so I'm able to charm up to 3 of them before they ended up attacking me. Make sense? So I charmed 3 of them, and then I went ahead and finished them off with Luca, even though I could have charmed 1 more, because I was trying to kill them before they ever had a chance to attack. Even though they're most likely going to attack each other, I just was doing that to be on the safe side. Now, something I realized in this playthrough is that apparently some of these Hydroconda fights will come back. So if you kill them, then some of them will go away forever, and you can only fight them once, and then other ones will come back and you can go back to the room and do it repeatedly. So if you want to, you can walk back and forth through some of these areas, like that elevator, for example. The enemies, I think those enemies respawn every time that you go in the elevator, but it's a random battle which one of those it'll be. It'll be either the 2 Fang Beasts, the 2 Cybots, or the 4 Ruminators / Hydrocondas. So it just depends on which one it is, but point being, you can potentially farm a whole bunch of Mega Elixirs if you keep going back and forth for some of the rooms here in the Black Omen. And I didn't realize that at the time when I was talking about that earlier in the walkthrough. I thought that there was only a finite number of Mega Elixirs, and I was mistaken. One thing that's kind of weird about those snakes too is that the Hydrocondas are resistant to light and shadow. It doesn't say this on their enemy entry in the Beastie area or anything, but they just take less damage from light and shadow, and I'm not entirely sure why. It's one of the few exceptions in the game where it's like that. So Magus will have kind of a hard time, and so will Robo and Chrono. But then meanwhile, Luca will have a very easy time with them, so she can do more than enough damage to deal with the snakes. So if you're in an area where you think there's going to be snakes, then having Luca in your party would be really smart. Luca's just good for all of Black Omen. She's just good for all these fights, both the boss battles as well as the enemies in general. She's just good for all of this. I've been really surprised how useful Luca has been this playthrough. I realize she's kind of slow, and I'm all obsessed with speed. I love fast characters, and just being able to react and they do good damage and everything. I'm like, oh yeah, characters like Ayla are my favorite because she's so fast. But that can be supplemented or fixed with speed capsule / tabs anyways. But one of the things I've noticed with Luca this time around in this playthrough is that even though she's slow, she just hits so hard. When she finally does use an ability, she destroys everything on the screen. She has really, really strong dual techs. I didn't like using her before because she was so slow, and it seemed like a lot of her abilities were teamed up with Flare, which made them really expensive. But if I play a gold stud on her anyways, it doesn't matter. So she has way more than enough MP to kill everything on an entire floor of the Black Omen, no problem, and she just destroys everything. And even though she's slow, like I currently in the video you're currently watching, I don't have a lot of speed capsules on her because this is before I did all the other character-specific side quests, so she doesn't have Tabin's suit, for example. In fact, I think that's even available right now. I could just go and get it, for example. But anyway, because I'm missing the extra speed from items like that, she's really, really slow. But it doesn't matter because by the time that Ayla... most of these combats I'm charming, right? So I charm with Marl and Ayla, and then by the time their turn comes back around again, Luca is finally ready. So that's the point when I'm ready to kill everything on screen anyways, and Luca will just one-shot them. Having Luca in that slot as opposed to any other character guarantees that when she does her dual tech, that everything dies. So it doesn't matter that Luca's a little bit slow because she's just going to kill everything anyway. I guess part of what I'm trying to express too is just that I didn't realize how superior Luca was in the magic department compared to other characters, both because she does good damage and stuff, and the fact that she has high-cost spells is actually a good thing because it means that she has higher multipliers, so she just hits really, really hard. but also the fact that enemies are more susceptible to fire damage, or there's less resistances for fire attacks than any other element in the game. And I didn't realize that. Now that I've looked through the bestiary a little bit more thoroughly, I realize that, and so it makes her much more viable in more situations. So if you don't, if you're looking for magic damage, but you're not sure who to bring, Luke is a super safe choice. She's just a really good character. She just works all the time. On the bottom left side of this room, there is 2 of those snakes, and you can charm them to get mega elixirs. And in the bottom right corner, there's 2 of these flyclops, which can be charmed to get the gold studs. I think these 2 combats are some of the easiest ones to charm these 2 particular items, and these enemies reappear when you exit the room and come back again. So if you exit through that south exit right there and come right back, you can get as many mega elixirs and gold studs as you want. This is the easiest place to do that. With the flyclops in particular, even if they steal all your MP, it doesn't really matter because that's like practically all they do, so it makes them not very much of a threat. There's also a chest in this room that has a magic crest, otherwise called a magic seal, and this is a pretty nice item that gives you magic defense and magic. Fairly useful on characters like Ayla, for example, who suffer in both of those categories, so it can really give her a boost for some of these boss battles in particular. Now in the next room we have a whole bunch of chests. You should totally grab all those. There's a Vigilant Hat, which is super useful. That's one of the most useful things if you're here early level, but also we have a Nova Armor, which we can use as well, so you don't have to worry about the Fang Beast and charming them as much. But you should go ahead and equip all of your guys with Nova Armor because this will make them status immune. So with status immunity on all of our dudes, we next want to put the 2 Vigilant Hats on our girls as well as Shal's Amulets. With those 3 items, we now have status immunity for all of our girls, and as a result, all of our characters now have status immunity. I think I'm actually missing 1 Nova Armor, so I need to charm 1 more in my particular case. But yeah, so now that's great, and that's one of the main things we need in order to survive. Now in this room, there are 2 news. One of them sells a bunch of ethers, in particular up to turbo ethers, which is pretty rare. That's super nice, restores your MP completely. Not as nice as mega elixirs, which are a little bit better. And again, the easiest way to get that is to charm the snakes that are just 1 room down. So that's the easiest place to do that. That combat there on the bottom left is really easy. So go ahead and use shelters and stuff and save up, and we're finally ready to continue on with the second half of the Black Omen, which I will be doing in the next video. This is a super long dungeon. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you found this helpful, be sure to throw a like on it, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content just like this. As always, stay awesome, have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.